Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
A Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts.
So, Eamon, you were writing about Kieran Fogarty this weekend in the Sunday World, and really his case, there's two young Limerick men involved in this case, and their lives are in stark contrast to each other. Kieran Fogarty is currently awaiting sentence in connection with driving causing death of a young man called Joe Drennan, who was a university student. Tell us what happened on the day that Joe Drennan was killed.
Yeah, so this was October 2023. Now, Joe Drennan was a university student in UL. He was studying journalism. Now, he wasn't from Limerick. I think he was from Mount Mellick in County Laois. But he was much loved fella. There was a huge amount of kind of tributes about him. He was, he'd been nominated for a kind of a Student of the Year or Student Journalist of the Year award. And he was quite a gay rights campaigner as well. So he was one of these guys who had he was a life to lead, coming near the end of his university degree. One of these people ready to kind of, really bloom and get going in the world.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he was cut down waiting for the bus, a BMW, basically going at high speed. It had passed out a Garda patrol car doing 120 kph on the Dublin road and hit a parked vehicle and span around a couple of times and basically hit Joe Drennan, who was standing waiting for the bus, and killed him. And the guy driving it was Kieran Fogarty, who was 19. And they're more or less the same age.
Yeah.
So you have, the description there of Joe Drennan. And then on the other hand, Kieran Fogarty was a young man, basically off his head on drugs, who'd been involved in, a gang who were fighting. I suppose they were in a feud at the time, and there'd been a number of incidents in the previous months all around Ballinacurra Weston, and they were targeting elements of a gang, an outfit run by Thomas O'Neill, who would have been sort of the Cratloe rapist, married to April Collins. It's just, as you say, it was a complete contrast.
Yeah, I mean, it's a stark contrast. I mean, Kieran Fogarty, I suppose you could say he's a very young man himself and has, but the level of violence that he was involved in, even in the run-up to the death of Mr. Drennan, there was a series of shootings. Of course, Kieran Fogarty, this is all based around the area of Ballinacurra West, and I suppose an area made notorious by the Dundon brothers. And Kieran Fogarty, after the Dundon brothers went to prison, certainly the level of violence calmed down. The murders stopped, but there has been an ongoing degree of basically a feud ongoing of a much lower level, but certainly very, very serious. And there's been a number of shootings. Obviously, a lot of this is centred around Thomas O'Neill, who, as you said, gone out with April Collins, and maybe other people associated with the London McCarthy gang, if not high up in it. Kieran Fogarty certainly was playing an active part in that in the run-up to this terrible tragedy.
Yeah, he would have been linked to a faction that, the Sunday World Reader reported, were being supplied by, Eds McCarthy. So that was very much kind of, the rump of the McCarthy Dundon gang. And they'd come into conflict with the Collinses, for lack of a better word, which is Thomas O'Neill's faction, that he was kind of seen as the leading light there. And it would have been April's, her family home would have been shot up at one point. And we wrote about at the time, they think, the house has been searched by guards and they noticed the bullet holes. Now, Fogarty kind of later confessed to the guards that he'd been involved in firing shots at a house. We're not sure if it's the same one. But, he was talking about he was off his head in drugs at the time and he was being threatened by these guys. So he let off a few shots to scare them, as he put it. So, you're talking about this kind of wild, reckless sort of gangland sort of behaviour. He was involved in violent disorder as well. And even at the time when he killed Joe Drennan in this shocking attack and driving the BMW, he was actually on bail for some of these. I suppose they were alleged offences at the time, but he's pleaded guilty to them now. And he shouldn't have been driving, Joe Drennan's family, and one of his, I think a sister mentioned her victim impact statement. She drew attention to the fact that she described him as an animal and he should have been locked up at the time. it was such a needless death in that regard. And when Fogarty was arrested a week later, like he was spotted, he was coming down the stairs in a house in rural North Cork. And there was two other fellas upstairs trying to flush cocaine down the toilet. I think it was like, whatever it was, about 15 or 17,000 worth of cocaine. So, you know, there were kind of that sort of street level dealers, obviously making a few quid. What level Fogarty was at, you know, I doubt he was really at the pinnacle, to be honest. It sounds like kind of very much a foot soldier. But at the same time, if he's in a house where they're cutting up the drugs, like, you know, he's not a complete beginner, you know, despite his young age.
Yeah, no, he's a 19-year-old, and exactly, these aren't the Kinnan cartel importing multi-million euro shipments of drugs, but this is a 19-year-old with access to firearms. He had the shots were fired from his own words using a semi-automatic pistol, and also you're dealing with cocaine. It's not €100 street deals. You're talking 14,000 at least was seized at that home. That feud, there's been a series of guard operations actually over the last couple of years, some of which we can not go into particular detail for legal reasons, but it happens every few months. The guards go in and haul out a couple of people. On one side, there's a very young associate of the Dundon brothers who's a serious concern for Gardaí. On the other side, we have Thomas O'Neill, as you said. Thomas O'Neill is currently in prison. I think he's serving a 3-year sentence, I believe, for drug dealing offences just given to him towards the end of last year. Obviously, he's very notorious for a really horrific crime committed when he was just 16 years old.
Yeah, I mean, there's Cratloe Wood. It's a place where sometimes people would park a car and go for a walk. In this case, it was to use the old-fashioned phrase, it was a courting couple in the car, and O'Neill would have been part of basically a gang of teenagers. Now, there was an older guy with them, but O'Neill was very much seen as the ringleader, and they basically attacked the couple. I think the guy involved was beaten with a golf club that was found in the boot of his car, and the woman was raped. So it was a pretty horrific crime at the time, you know, and you know, he's been known as one of the Cratloe Wood rapists since. I mean, there's others as well that we've continued to write about, but he seems to have, you know, kind of shrugged off any of that kind of reputation that would normally come with a sex offender, and has, you know, remained an active criminal. And, you know, we've written about him a number of times over the last couple of years, and, you know, he's, well, I suppose not unapologetic as such, but like he's, you know, it hasn't stopped his career path, you know, and this is what he does. You know, he's part and parcel of that Limerick scene, you know, one of these street dealers dealing drugs, and it seems to be all he's ever known, and seems to be continue with it. And he's been in and out of jail quite a number of times.
And that's definitely the extent of his ambition. So Fogarty, he's pled guilty to dangerous driving causing death. The family did give a victim impact statement, but it hasn't yet. He's awaiting sentencing currently at this point. Yeah,
it's due at the end of the month. And there would have been, you know, there was a fair bit of mitigation on his part. You know, there was an apology, you know, he gave an apology to the guards, but the guard gave evidence that he felt it was rather hollow. And the reason for this was that they were able to find messages where he shown that he was aware that he was after hitting somebody. Like, it wasn't like he could pretend that he didn't know there was somebody literally pinned underneath the car. He took a time to do a little bit of wiping it down, as he mentioned, so he's forensically aware. He was trying not to leave his fingerprints. He kind of told his mother he wasn't going to hand himself in. Why would I? You know, so I mean, there was a kind of more than an initial lack of remorse. I mean, it took a week later before he was arrested, and he was eventually, I think, on the 3rd or 4th interview with the guards before he finally kind of admitted, you know, his role in it. I think there was CCTV from a bus that was coming in the opposite direction, and it showed him he had spent 14 seconds in the car wiping it down before he got out.
Yeah.
And some of his messages were straight away. You know, it was after killing a 21-year-old and a woman at the time. He wasn't, you know, that was what was quoted in court. So he was aware people had been injured, and he left the scene. So I mean, you know, he's 46 previous convictions, including 5 for dangerous driving. He was on bail at the time. So it remains to be seen, you know, what kind of sentence he'll get. I imagine, you know, dangerous driving causing death, I mean, they tend to be about the 5 or 6 years, you know, at the upper end from, you know, at the top of my head. I think a lot of the time when there isn't this sort of exacerbating factors involved. That's kind of the length you're talking about. So we'll see. You know.
People look. It can definitely vary, but I think the fact that somebody is banned as a banned driver when this occurred certainly won't stand in his favour. We'll follow this up anyway because it is one of those cases. It's just that stark contrast really always stands out, I think, in this one, and we'll follow it up when we reach the sentencing hearing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks, Eamon.
Cheers, Niall.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.